This evening, I'd like to take a few minutes just to highlight a few of the significant innovations that have gone on in the NYPD over the last several years. Now, this is not to suggest that we think our work is done, but to the contrary, we recognize that there is still a lot of work to be done, and this is just the beginning. This is part of an ongoing effort at continuous improvement. I'll back up. I'm sorry. Yeah, one more. Thank you. So I just want to talk about training for a moment. I cannot overestimate the value of training. It's critical to what we do. And it's not just for new recruits. You know, Chief Holmes mentioned recruitment and bringing people into the police department. So that's only the beginning. They will receive 6 months of training in the academy to prepare them to be police officers. But really, the skills that a police officer needs must be continually refreshed. A lot of the skills that we use every day are perishable, so training has to be an ongoing effort. And we view this as a career-long process of professional development. And we've recently expanded our commitment to that training. So we've gone from an average of about 3 days a year to now 10 or more days annually for most police officers. We've also developed an online distance learning platform. So smartphones, they're ubiquitous, but they're not new, right? Most people have them. All of our police officers have them. But we've been able to leverage our smartphones, and we've been able to push out training material and information to our police officers department-wide instantaneously. And since we've rolled out this online learning platform, we've rolled out over 100,000 hours of video content for our officers. Key courses that we've put online and done in person include implicit bias, de-escalation, physical tactics, critical decision-making, and crisis intervention training. Perhaps the most important decision that a police officer can make is to use force. That decision does not come easy at times, but unfortunately, given the nature of police work and crime fighting generally, sometimes it is absolutely necessary. But through our policies, training, and oversight, we look to make that as infrequent as possible. And I think this chart is a great example of the evolution that we've experienced over the past several decades. So in 1972, we had 994 officer-involved shootings in New York City. And consider that was a smaller police force in a city of about 7 million people. Fast forward, 2020, year to date, we've had 29 officer-involved shootings citywide, and 15 of those were adversarial, meaning between a police officer and an adversary confronting that police officer. The rest were mostly accidental shootings. In 2016, we revised our use of force policies. So our new policies now include comprehensive reporting and data collection, and also the investigation of each use of force incident. And all of that use of force data is available on our website. So investigative encounters or stop, question, and frisk. So we all know the damage that this led to, and that it led to a significant erosion of trust in the city by the overuse of stop and frisk. We go back to 2011. There were over 695,000 stops in the city. So we've been working very, very hard to reduce the number of stops, police smarter, and rebuild trust with the community. And interestingly, if you look at this chart, you see as the number of stop and question incidents declined over the years, major felony crime also continued to decline during this same period. And that proves the concept of precision policing, that if we work together with community, focus on the relatively small number of individuals who are responsible for most of the serious crime, we can still be effective in reducing crime, rather than directing enforcement or deploying numbers of people in geographical areas where crime is occurring. Discipline, of course, is a great concern. We always get many questions about discipline, and I think part of that concern and part of the distrust is because for many, many years, discipline in the NYPD was shrouded in mystery because of state law. State law prevented us from releasing information about discipline to the public. In 2018, the department commissioned a blue ribbon panel to take a look at our disciplinary system, and they had access to all of our people and records. And ultimately, they issued a report in 2019, and they concluded that discipline was generally robust and fair. However, it lacked transparency, and that undermined everything we were looking to do. They made a series of recommendations. We have accepted and adopted all of their recommendations. And we've been publishing data about discipline, and that's online and goes back to 2016. In the near future, we are going to be publishing a lot more information about discipline, and that'll be on our website as well. Now, recently, state law was revised, so that enables us to release more information about discipline. Also, the panel recommended, and this has come up, we've heard this from community for quite some time, that the NYPD consider a disciplinary matrix or guidelines so that we could have a statement or a document that lets the public know what discipline is like and what the penalties are for certain acts of misconduct, but also it'll let our employees know what they can expect and what's required of them. And so along those lines, for about a year now, over a year, we had worked on putting together disciplinary guidelines. In August, we put those guidelines online. We had a 30-day public comment period. We received a lot of comments from the public, both online and through letters. We're currently going through all that material now. We expect to make some revisions to those guidelines. And then by January, we expect to have a final set of guidelines that we will publish along with a report explaining the feedback we got and what changes we made as a result. And when I say final guidelines, they're never really final. We view it as a living document. Certainly over time, new priorities may emerge, or situations may change, or we want to change or add something, and we'll be able to do that. Data transparency. So again, transparency, very, very important to building trust. The big problem we had in the area of discipline was lack of transparency. So in order to address that, we're creating online dashboards. So we've been publishing some data online for several years now, data about stop and question, use of force, crime, summonses. However, the data has not necessarily been user-friendly or easy to search and understand. Great for researchers because it was raw data, not necessarily great for somebody in the public who just wants to interact with our website and learn more about the police department. So that's all changing. We have new dashboards coming online. So today you can go to our website, go to CompStat 2.0. You can have an interactive experience looking at crime data all around the city. And we have these two dashboards. One deals with the demographics of the NYPD, and the other deals with hate crimes in New York City. And we have more dashboards coming on use of force and discipline. So those will be up soon. So the NYPD has the largest body-worn camera deployment in the country. We presently have over 25,000 police officers and supervisors in the field, in patrol assignments, meaning precincts, transit districts, housing, emergency services unit, highway patrol, a number of other units that engage in enforcement and deal with the public, all equipped with body-worn cameras. We have a comprehensive policy that we've published that gives them direction on how to use those cameras as well. Since we first rolled out body-worn cameras beginning in 2017, over 13 million police interactions with the public have been recorded. We're adding about 130,000 new videos each week. Now, to make sure it's being done right, we have an auditing program in place where we're looking at body camera video and we're looking at incidents to make sure police officers are recording. And they're also being used in investigations, and quite successfully, including civilian complaint review board investigations. And we're using body-worn cameras for review by supervisors. So supervisors can assess the performance of their personnel and then take any corrective action if necessary. Body-worn camera video from critical incidents is routinely being published by the department, including officer-involved shootings. So the NYPD has a YouTube channel, and we post all of those videos on our YouTube channel. So they're available for public view. And then finally, we need to look internally as well, everything that we're doing outwardly, but we also need to augment that with how we're dealing with our own employees internally. We could not provide quality police service if we weren't listening to and addressing the needs of our employees as well. So the engagement internally takes many forms, and it includes forums on race and social justice. Commissioner Meisenholder is here. That's under her purview, so if you have any questions, she'll be happy to get into the details of it. But essentially, we're getting a lot of very, very powerful emotional feedback that's helping give us ideas on how to make the department more inclusive and more equitable. We're also supporting the health needs of our employees through a number of programs. This is to make our employees more resilient and also address a lot of the stress and trauma that comes with policing. One example of that is a peer support program that makes counselors and resources available as needed. I will now turn it back over to Chief Holmes. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm going to mention quickly, we've already had 2 meetings like this, one in Staten Island, one in Queens North. And I must say that people shared a lot of their concerns with us about discipline, transparency, how do we respond to emotionally disturbed person. One woman's statement was heartfelt. She spoke about wanting to love her police, but the police loving her. And they also spoke about diversity of the police department. So here this evening, you have the same opportunity to do the same. You can share, ask any questions, or share any of your concerns with the city, with NYPD, or with the mayor's office. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our facilitators for the evening, and that's going to be, and I hope I don't mess up her name, Miss Ayana Behin, and also Jennifer Jones Austin. Thank you.
Certainly, I'm Jennifer Jones Austin. Mike don't, so we need to take care of that. Jennifer Austin, and I, as a telephone in Queens tonight, I also do not work for the NYPD, but I am working with community and NYPD to bring about fit and serve our community. I head up an organization, the Welfare Agency. It's a faith-based organization. Partner with community organizations and faith-based organizations across the city, centering on equity and opportunity for everyone. And I'm a church girl, so I'm very much at home here at LME, and I want to appreciation of everyone here to and Reverend Flake for giving us the space this evening.
Thanks, Jennifer. Can everybody hear me? This mic isn't working. Do you want me to go to that one? Is this working? It's enough to give us some feedback, but not enough to make you hear me. Okay. All right. So here's what we want to do right now. This is the next phase of the conversation. First, we've heard an update from the police about where they are and what's going on in NYPD right now. But the next phase of the conversation is really your conversation, right? This is where you have the opportunity to tell your stories and ask questions of the department. And we have tonight the commissioner and all of these chiefs and deputy chiefs just waiting to hear from you, right? So this is your conversation online and in the room. We want to hear from you so that the NYPD can absorb what you're saying, answer your questions in this next phase, and then move forward from there, having heard what you have to say, okay? So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to first start off with somebody who's in the room who has a question.
was that he looked at his employees and said, this is a positive thing. All of our mistakes are now in the ashes, and we get an opportunity for a fresh start. So the pointed question that I have from the community is, when we talk about reinvent and reform, are we really committed to the true sense of the word reinvent and reform? Nassau County, and I know it's not New York City, Nassau County, in order to be a Nassau County police officer, you have to live in the county. The NYPD is not like that. So is the NYPD top brass willing? Because in order to have a neighborhood, you need neighbors. And when you have neighbors, you have a community, people working together, you have ownership. And are the police department willing to tell the new recruits, you have to be a part of the community that you're policing in order to have a sense of ownership?
Matt, you don't know the current numbers that reside in the city, do you?
It's about 52%,
On the uniform
but
side?
since 2015, but we've hired 60%.
Yeah. Okay, a lot of numbers here. Can you hear me? So I'll tackle I think the bigger question first is, or maybe I have it backwards. We are absolutely willing to reinvent. I think that we would not be here if we were not. I think I can tell you 100% from myself, from the top down, that I set the example, that we are committed to listening, to hearing, to taking nothing for granted. I think too often that happens. And we have to listen to the people we serve. And we have to look inward before we start speaking and talking about everything that we do. We're 100% committed to reinventing and correcting mistakes and building anew. And I like your example of, it's an opportunity, I think. When you speak about the example that you raised of being in the community, I've seen all sides of that. I grew up in the city. I moved out at one time. Why did I move out? For financial reasons, because I couldn't afford to live in the city at the time. And now I'm back in the city. So I think I have a good perspective on it. Right now, currently, the rules are that we have different rules for the NYPD on uniform and then civilian members. Over 50% of the force on the uniform side does, in fact, live in the city, but you're right, they can live in the surrounding counties, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Orange, Rockland, and Putnam County. Is that something that could be looked at? It's absolutely something that could be looked at, but I also think I think trust is earned, and you lose trust very quick, and if I say something that's going to hold out to be not true, shame on me. So that is not something that currently, as we sit here today, that's even remotely close to being put into effect. But with that said, I understand where it's coming from your view, because it's been tried over the years. I mean, certainly in different aspects. We've had programs where we incentivize people to live in the city. Specifically, I think I came on the job back in 1991, and I can remember a program back then, the Officer Next Door program. I don't remember all the details, but it was, take a spot, we'll get you a cheaper place to live, and then you commit to it. And that kind of fizzled out over time. But, this is one of the struggles that we face as a department. We don't have difficulty in recruiting people to come onto the NYPD. Across the country, there is a huge problem right now in recruitment of police officers, even before this, and now it's exacerbated. Hasn't been the case here, thank goodness, and it still isn't. But people living in the New York City, I don't have to tell anyone here how expensive it is, and that is really the balance that we're always trying to strike there. So we're not close to putting in anything. It's certainly something that could be legislated for sure, it's something that could be explored, but right now the balance is what it is, and it's not close to being changed. I could tell you, though, that from a philosophical level, I agree wholeheartedly that there's nothing like, I used to run ComStat, and at times when I'd see different parts of the city, and it always strikes me, Staten Island as an example, because it's such a different borough, right? I don't even know sometimes the Staten Island think, can I say this? We're done with Staten Island. Sometimes they don't even consider themselves part of New York, right? The joke. Some of the work that we would see in Staten Island was phenomenal. And the reason was because it was so condensed and closed, and everyone lived close and felt that. So there's absolutely, I agree with a lot of what you said, but we're not close yet for some of the reasons that I highlighted.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that answer. We want to turn to John Spolaro on Zoom, who's got a question about training and accountability. And for those in the room, we're going to try to give time for people on Zoom, Facebook, and people in the room. Okay, so John Spolaro, with your question about training and accountability. Get it? John Spolaro, training and accountability on Zoom. I think what's supposed to happen is Zoom is supposed to come into the room, but while we're waiting for that to happen, I guess whoever wants to kind of give us some feedback about, some of the changes that you're making to training and accountability and some of the issues that the community has raised about making sure that officers are trained well and thoroughly and that they're held accountable for missions. Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so no, training is crucial to what we do. It's a never-ending process. So when you think about a lot of the skills that police officers need to do their jobs, a lot of the tactical skills, those are perishable. I mean, think about things that, we've all had this experience, things we've learned in school or learned in life, how to do something, but then we don't do it in a while. And we go back to it and we try to do something and we're like, how do I do this again? And me, I'm taking out the iPad, I'm looking at videos on YouTube, like how do you, do this thing? And I kind of reteach myself. It's the same thing with policing. When we hire young people, they go through the police academy for 6 months. We give them all the basic skills they need to begin. But then really it's the next 20, 25, 30 years of learning. And, we have to understand that there's a cost to that. There's a financial cost. There's a cost in resources. People are not available to go on patrol if we're sending them to training. That training is absolutely essential. And, I highlighted a couple of the training curricula that we've rolled out over the last couple of years: implicit bias, crisis intervention training. The crisis intervention training course is a scenario-based training teaching officers how to deal with people in some emotional distress. But that's a 4-day course that we take people offline for. But it's worth the investment. And it has to be done and redone over and over again because these skills are perishable. And then training is also important because training is part of policy. So when we talk about accountability, training fits into that because it's not just what we publish in a memo or in our procedural manual, it's also what we teach. So all of our training curriculum materials are also policy and must be complied with, and will be the basis for either discipline or some other remedial action if not complied with.
Were you able to get a follow-up? Let me get the individual, the specific question. Were you able to get the specific question about training and accountability?
You're going to be able to do it because your mic is working.
Okay. Is John Scalero on Zoom now? Okay, John, let's hear from you.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi. Talk to us.
Well, I was just curious how the supervision works in the field after people have been trained and to ensure that they're still following it.
So,
Would you like to please?
I would.
Chief?
So, John, hi, how are you? Thank you for joining us this evening. When I hear you, I think about, especially when you make mention of supervision. Often enough in New York City, when I hear anyone ask me about training and accountability, it's really almost like, what are you training these guys to do? It's almost like you had an experience of someone being disrespectful or doing something that appears to be unbecoming for an officer to be doing. It's being that they're employed by New York City, they're representing the NYPD, they're in uniform. So it sounds like I hear more of, when you say the supervision, that you're experiencing something other than just the training aspect of 6 months in the police academy, learn how to use a firearm, learn how to deal with an emotionally disturbed person. Am I accurate in saying that?
Sure.
So do you want to?
It's the after effect once they're in the field and, they're somewhat on their own and, they're not seasoned and it shows a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. We had in the borough. Okay.
Hey, John, thank you for your question. And I think there's going to be a few topics that are going to be interwoven here today. But the best way really to verify that training is taking place is observations by supervisors. And one of the best tools we have for observations now are body-worn cameras. I know that as a borough commander overseeing other precinct commanders, they're required to review these body-worn cameras on a regular basis and take note of, more or less, if they're following their training, if they're following procedures, and to find out if retraining is necessary or if they're following the procedures the way they should be. So I think the body-worn camera, one of the great benefits that we've had from it is to be able to verify and validate training. And sometimes we use that training back with other police officers to show them, maybe the mistakes that they made, just so sometimes that's the best way to share that experience with everybody. A roll call is not by condemning someone, but looking to see how that happened in actuality and in practice, how we can improve it the next time.
So I think this is very helpful because I think what John is helping us to appreciate, and we need to make sure that we take note of this and we really explore this, is that he's raising an issue about what, as you spoke to Chief Holmes, he may have experienced or other people experiencing. And he's curious about what are the checks and balances that are in place, that if what is trained on is actually not happening, even with body cameras, even with supervisors, like what are the checks and balances? So we need to make sure that we are making note of this checks and balances issue, right? Things may be trained on, but if they aren't played out in practice on the street, or if somebody's doing it for 3 months and then they stop and there's nobody there to check them on it, that's a problem.
Yeah, correct. I agree.
Commissioner, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, thank you. We could spend a lot of time on this one. Ruben hit on what I was thinking with the body cameras, and it's been a tremendous tool for us in terms of putting into policy and practice. Body cameras were mandated initially, and now we're at 25,000 plus. They came out of the stop, question, and frisk ultimately, and we've kind of pivoted and now really learned the value of utilizing the body cameras to really look for problems before they become bigger problems, and putting training. And earlier this year, Ben Tucker, who's not here tonight, oversees all of the training in the NYPD, and it's a monumental task. And he has training sergeants now embedded, something that we did this year, and put them directly under the training bureau in each precinct to really just push that training level down. But I could tell you that it's incidents in New York City. It's really, the world has shrunk, as we all know, and what we don't want to learn is, you hit it on the head, how do you know it's really working? And let's not learn about it through a video on YouTube or Twitter, and now it's happened. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at, I could tell you, incidents that happen across the country, and we know them because we've all seen those incidents, right? And, you know, just about 2 weeks ago, I tapped one of the chiefs in the training bureau and said, take a look at this incident that happened to be in Rochester. And what would our cops have done? And we put together a small video of the incident, showed it to cops in the NYPD, and did kind of a forum like this and let them comment on it. Be careful what you ask for, because I said to the chief, show me the comments. He handed me a stack of paper like this. I'm still not done reading it. That's how many. And it was legitimate, real comments from the police officers. And it was kind of like you'll get, I think, in an audience today. Not everyone agreed. This is the most diverse city in the world where everyone has an opinion. And I'm not talking just color of skin here. It's no one should make assumptions that everyone thinks the same thing, right?
Right.
And I think I do a lot of things bad. I think one of the things that I do okay is wanting to hear all those opinions. And the cops that saw that video, they were right on. They were right on. And we use things like that to now hopefully train repetitiveness. Let's avoid a bad incident here. I would like to say, Jennifer, though, you know, Matt started with some of the numbers here. You know, whether you're talking gun arrests or 6 million radio runs a year or emotionally disturbed person calls, like for the emotionally disturbed person calls, I'm actually proud. I mean, that came up a lot in the last couple of hearings that we had here. But when you think of the calls that we get and the amount that have weapons involved and the use of force is less than 1% of the time. So I would say maybe that's still too much, but I think it's also a little bit of evidence that the training is taking hold and working too. When we get to a really volatile situation and maybe it's somebody in distress with a weapon and we're able to handle that, get them the help they need, and no force is used. So it truly never ends.
Very, very helpful. Let's make sure in the training we also focus on the how thorough is the training, and is it responsive to the situations that are presenting?
So we're going to circle back to training later on, but we really want to make sure that the questions from the people who are in the room and also on Zoom and Facebook are getting answered too. So I see your hand, sir. There's a queue. So I'm going to go with Jennifer Blair, who's in the audience, next. Does somebody want to get Jennifer the microphone, or do you want me to read it? Yeah, he's got a microphone there if you'd like. I can read it. Okay. She says, Rockaway is progressive but segregated, with pockets of ethnic enclaves and limited activities for young people. Is there a nuanced cultural sensitivity component that a community member can engage law enforcement in sharing information daily? So,
I'll try not to hog up the mic. It's a good that we're getting a question on Rockaway. I know we have some Rockaway representatives here. I also own a house in Rockaway and lived there for 20 years. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the issues in Rockaway. I was there, 5 years ago when someone fired a gun in front of my daughter in front of our house. So I know, and that was a young man. That was a young man who's probably not getting the resources and the attention probably that he needs to avoid kind of a life of crime. But I know that what Queens South did, what the NYPD did, they put a football program, an initiative to be able to service those kids that really weren't getting maybe any service from the traditional locations, and to build relationships between the police officers and the young people in that community. And that program really targeted kids under 13. So we could try to bring them in before they started getting in trouble with the law and before they started really developing problems. They were already developing problems at school, so we made sure we picked kids that were already having problems in school. We didn't just pick good kids, like the good kids that were listening and sitting in their seats and coming to school every day, but the kids that were challenged and that had issues going on at home that really needed the help. And that program is sponsored by the Giants. The police commission did the right thing and took the program away from me, but I think it's for a good reason. It's to make it a citywide program, to bring a program like that to more neighborhoods in New York City so we can have more options for the young people out there, and so that way we can divert them from going into maybe a life of crime or trying the criminal element or associating with the wrong people. So I think that's one of the things that we're doing in Rockaway. There's other programs that we have in addition to that. We have Explorer programs for scouting, so we can try to introduce young men and women into the profession of law enforcement. So I think that's also another important thing that we do in the NYPD. We just started a youth coordination officer program, so I was also in charge of school safety before, and I got to begin this program with some of the people that are here and Commissioner Parker. And I think COVID kind of slowed us down a little bit in implementing that, but now we have youth coordinating officers with resources at their disposal that they can refer children to, so that way we can stop them from going into a life of crime.
If I may, Assistant Chief Beltran, I just want to ask you to pause for a second. I want to ask you, is this responding to your question? About the segregation?
So
she's
if I can
speaking.
just repeat what she's saying or paraphrase, she's saying that is helpful, but what she really wanted to focus on is the specific community identity, segregation within the community, and how that impacts the way that the police officers interact with different members in the community.
It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, and that's probably a deeper, it has some probably police relations aspects to it, but it's more of an issue of maybe the history of Rockaway and the fact, because it is kind of segregated, kind of isolated. I'll use the term isolated because I know more about that it's physically isolated from other parts of the city and from Queens, almost similar to Staten Island. So they have unique problems and unique issues, and sometimes they don't have programs to address those specific issues, but that's why we kind of thought out of the box for this football program, because nobody else was doing that, but we did that especially for what the needs were for the confrontations.
But if I may, Assistant Chief Beltran, and forgive me, I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to say that I think what we're really talking about here relates back to what you brought up, about officers knowing the community, being part of the community, and knowing the people within the community. And that's what we need to center on. The response may be recreational centers. It may be more sensitivity training. It may be more cultural training. We don't have the answer in this moment.
Yep.
And I think what we need to center on right now, and I'm looking at the note takers, we need to center on this piece that essentially we keep going back to cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness, training. Who are the people in the community, right? Mm-hmm. Beginning with all kids are good, right? Some just experience different challenges along the way, and how do we engage with them?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but
thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and also
thank you, sir.
These kinds of this topic is also part of what's happening in the Zoom. So if we can just switch back to, sorry, it's the mask. Okay, so if we can just switch back to Zoom, and then we'll come back into the room and just stay here on race, Black Lives Matter, and the like, and we'll go to Claudia Gray. Claudia?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for providing the opportunity, which is appreciated. I wanted us to focus more on how do we deal with bad cops? How can we provide incentive for officers who are good to show up in places which they haven't been able to show up? It seems to me there needs to be some kind of reward, incentive for good cops to do the right thing, which is needed in the Black community. Thank you so much.
So, thank you. If I can paraphrase, let's see if this is where you're going with your question. You want to make sure that the police officers in the Black community are of the highest quality, and you're looking for ways to incentivize police officers to develop their skills? Or is that around? And to get rid of bad cops.
So is this a
Is that about
topic
right?
for Deputy Commissioner Meisenholder? Or? So the commissioner, okay. That's what happens when
You're going to be tired. They put me there on purpose. I think the question was a little different, and on Zoom, thank you for the question, you can tell me. What I heard there was, how do we change the culture? And that's what it is to me, that when you have an officer that's doing something wrong, that the good cops step in and feel comfortable enough stepping in and changing it. I mean, I think that that's what it was. And I can tell you that I think that's more of a cultural. I think it brings up, if we're going to be honest, conversations about things such as like the blue wall of silence, and you start to hear these terms. And I can tell you it's something that's extremely important to us as I think of all of this. And I never think of this in isolation. I start from a place, we haven't talked yet about implicit bias, but we all have biases. And I have my own biases, I'm sure. And we would have probably different opinions at times about police. I happen to think that the vast, vast majority of police come to work each day and want to help people and serve the public and do good. And I hope the people watching and sitting here would agree with me on that. But there's also people in any profession, and certainly in our profession too, that don't adhere to that. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us in the law enforcement profession to speak out about that and to hold people accountable. And we started tonight's discussion about transparency and about discipline, and about part of it is telling you what we're already doing. Part of it is about listening to you and when we're not doing enough, and holding people accountable. I'll give you a couple of examples. An incident, whether you're talking excessive force, whether it's a chokehold or whatever it is. We've seen videos across the country. Where is that first officer or second officer stepping in and hitting the first officer on the shoulder and saying, that's enough? That's exactly what we're talking about here. I could tell you that I was briefed, and I mentioned this the other night, on a program where we're considering investing in right now that really gets to the heart of that. And it's about teaching our officers, scratch that, teaching me and executives down, of creating a culture where that type of activity is rewarded, where people feel comfortable enough. This is not just, I gave this example, I think the other night in Staten Island. Would a nurse walking by a hospital floor feel comfortable to tell the doctor you're doing that wrong? Probably not. I think that exists in policing as well as some other professions. But I'm not worried about all those other professions. I'm worried about the NYPD. I think we can do better. We're looking to really invest in a program now that gives that the best opportunity to succeed. But I can't remember the Zoom caller's name, but I would agree with you that that remains something that we have to get better at. And we have to also know that at times we're not going to be perfect. That's where we have to be swift, and that's me. Call it out and say this was wrong, and then hold people accountable.
Very much appreciated. That's like the hardest nut to crack. But I said the hardest nut to crack is the culture piece, but we have to pay attention.
It is. It really is. I want to go back to Zoom, and I want to make sure that you get a comment card so that we know when you're up. But I want to go back to Zoom to Kate, who has a question about Black Lives Matter and NYPD.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if the NYPD had reached out to members or to leaders and activists from Black Lives Matters and is willing to work with them, as well as whether or not the NYPD is sort of willing to entertain the idea of, reallocating funds to community services like Black Lives Matter activists are requesting.
Kate, the caller's name, Zoom caller?
It was Kate.
Kate? Hi, Kate, how are you? Can you just broaden on that a little bit, just as far as your question? You said, thanks. I believe it was referencing, did we reach out to anyone from Black Lives Matter?
I think she's asking, are we dialoguing, like as part of these
Right.
conversations?
So-
Yeah. Are there conversations happening between the leadership of Black Lives Matter and the leadership of the NYPD, and sort of how much dialogue is there?
So I can't speak to how much dialogue that's currently going on, but I do know as part of this session that we're holding now, that key stakeholders in New York City, no matter what title they hold, will be invited in and given a platform to be heard. That is true. Okay.
That's not true. There's key stakeholders in this community who are on the front line of this issue, and we're not invited.
Oh, well, I
So let me just
apologize
quickly
for
interject
that.
here, if I may just
Yes.
quickly interject here and
Yes.
say that there are 8 patrol meetings that are being held. And let me finish. Erica, why don't you let me, Erica, I'm not trying to speak for myself, Erica.
Okay, Jennifer.
I'm a part of this.
For yourself, you should have said, no, I don't want to be on this committee.
Erica, I'm trying the way that you try every day. I am trying to, Erica.
Okay.
What I want to say to everybody else, if Erica's not, I wish she'd listen to me. There are going to be meetings with stakeholders, with organization leaders and community persons.
Right, but Erica, this is not the only meeting for this borough. Queens South has many more stakeholder meetings where you will be invited to the table, but I just want to move on for the evening. Listen, I probably, but can, okay, so can we just take the people that came here tonight? I agree with
I
you.
want to make sure that you get a chance
We
to
all
have the
agree with you, Erica.
You gotta stop putting the people who make it look good and deal with the issue. And that is the problem with policing. So if you want to talk about reform, it's going to the goddamn issue.
Okay.
And stop skirting around it. Because having a conversation is a beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman. But they don't deal with this issue.
Erica, I agree.
So when you want to deal with reform, you got to go to the
Absolutely.
place of the problem. And the problem is y'all don't want to deal with the problem.
But that's
the
why
issue.
you're here this
No,
evening, to
that's
have a
not why
voice.
I'm here.
It is true. That's why you're here. You're here because you're giving a voice, Erica. So I just want everyone else that came out to be allowed to ask their questions. But I can assure you, you have a seat at the table, whether it was this table or Jennifer's table, but you will have a seat at the table to be heard. Okay.
The only thing I would add is, where we are especially, let's try to take it down a notch and
Christ was a revolutionary.
understood. But you know what? I think that, let's look at where we are today. Let's look at where we are in 2 weeks with an election in New York City, right? And somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And I said this yesterday. And guess what? We still have all the same problems that we got to fix. So let's start working towards fixing them. And I don't know everything. I certainly don't, Erica. But I know that talking and having conversations and listening is a heck of a lot better than us fighting. So that's what I'll say on that.
So for those of you who aren't in the room, one of our guests wanted to talk about the process and wanted to, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get a microphone at some point so that you all can hear her perspective about the process and making sure that there are lots of voices in the room. Back to an in-person person who's on the list. Beulah Wilson from Queens Village, 105th Precinct, has a question. Beulah.
It's okay. I want to know, you were
The reason we want you to have a microphone is so that everybody can hear you who's not in the room, and also people who are in the room. Because right now this is streaming on Facebook Live and Zoom, and it's going to be recorded and shared.
I want to know why after 41 years, overnight, the 116th precinct, which would benefit our community, was taken away. And the money, they said, went to a community center in Roy Wilkins Park. We in Queensbridge didn't get nothing, but they can find money to do all sorts of things. But what would help our community was just taken away overnight, just like that.
So that was disappointing would be an understatement to both the NYPD and to the community. I mean, that's something that a lot of people have worked for a number of years. In terms of, as I think of the landscape of New York City and precincts, 77 precincts, the 105 precinct in Southeast Queens is one of the largest geographical, as you know. And from north to south, that is quite a distance that you have to travel. That was scheduled to have currently the setup is a precinct and a satellite. Through the hard work of the community for a long time fighting, there was money allocated in the capital budget to have a new precinct, but unfortunately with the budget process that went underway in the end of June, that was one of the things that was put off, canceled. And we understand your frustration. I think we're all frustrated in that, and angry. I understand 100%. I truly do. And it's your voice. I have had that same thing said to me by a number of people, but that was one of the casualties, if you will, of the latest round of budget.
The next person is Kevin Livingston. The microphone is right behind you, sir.
Good afternoon. Good evening. So my question is, when you started to have these listening sessions, why are there no young people that you quote unquote are policing or trying to prevent in these meetings? Why you have 30 people here and we can look around and see the average age? Why are they not invited to these meetings? That's number one. And number two, priority or prioritization you was talking about of officers living in the community. Why is that not top priority? Because I could also very much remember when you guys had the impact officers come down to Jamaica Avenue on the corner of Parsons and Archer and was scared to death of these young people because they never had dealt with them before. The same young people you deal with in Putnam County is not who you deal with in South Jamaica, Queens, or Brownsville. So why is that not a prioritization to have the officers live in the communities? But again, why are the young people not here?
So, yes, so all of the meetings encompass Facebook live stream, which we know young people, that's their preferred method of communication, as well as Zoom. So we have the capability of having 1,000 members on Zoom. I'm not saying that, I agree with you. I agree with you, I agree with you, right? But even if we had them here, we're only allowed to have 30, 35 people. Okay, so
if I may just interject for a minute. I think you're asking a very good question. May I finish? I want to sir, I want to respond to you. I want to respond. Yes, I want to respond to you. The NYPD has put together some invitation lists. Some people have responded, some people have not. Well, I'm part of, my name is attached to this too, and I want you to know that I am as May I, sir, if I may? You will hear from it. Okay, I am trying to be respectful of you.
Jennifer.
Okay.
So what's your name again? I apologize. Kevin, hi. So I'm going to say you're right. Okay, how about that? Let me finish though. Let me finish. I want to respond to your statement. I think we could do a better job at having more young people at the table, right? I agree with that. As a matter of fact, in Staten Island, that was accomplished, right? In Queens North, that was accomplished. So maybe we missed something, right, during this round. But this is not the last meeting, is what I've been trying to get across this evening. But with that being said, let's touch on the other thing you brought up as far as diversifying the police department with people that live in New York City. So yes, we do have a lot of officers that live outside of New York City. With that being said, that has nothing to do with recruiting within New York City. And I think that's the answer that you're looking for, right? We should have more recruitment sessions in the city of New York, and that can be accomplished. I'm going to finish. That can be accomplished because now that's why we're here to listen, so we can make sure that we're carrying that out. We know we have a small recruitment unit because cops, we need them, right? We defunded, we have cops retire. We need cops to answer to the calls of the people calling. I get that. But we're going to have to become more creative when it comes to recruiting in New York City. And whether that means using our community affairs, like I mentioned the other evening, to have a session once a month or once every 2 weeks, where they have a table out there. How do you take the exam? If you don't have a college education, what are my alternatives, such as FEMA college credits given online, right? And you just have to pay to have them put on a transcript. We could be doing a lot better in the area of recruiting within the city of New York. We will be doing. That's why we're here tonight, Kevin. Thank you for bringing that up. I can assure you, you're going to see a change where we will do a better job at recruiting in New York City. Kevin, I'll see to it. I can assure you that.
And Kevin, what I want you to appreciate is that we're as much concerned about who's in the room and who's not in the room as you are. And what we are doing, Arva Rice and myself, is looking at who's not in the room and then engaging with them to make sure that the people who aren't in the room will be in the room. We've been doing, yes, and I said that your name, yes, I do, Erica. You were not included, because I understood that you were going to be here.
I'm going to just interrupt really quickly because I do want to make sure that the conversation is happening. But again, without a microphone, other people are being left out of the conversation. And the purpose of tonight is to give voice to you and the other people in this neighborhood and the other people in the city. And so I think that they've heard this piece. I think they heard you, and I think they heard Mr. Kevin talking about engagement and about who's in the room. And I think that is lessons learned and something that continue to work on for the rest of the 8 meetings, and then also for phase 2.
For CMS to get the participants that we work with, or the ones who are mostly engaged.
Here's a microphone.
Will you commit to one of those on this reinvention?
Commit to what? Could you say that one more time?
Will you commit to a meeting?
Erica, didn't we invite you into One Police Plaza recently? Let me just
we
to
did
Kevin.
Comstat.
I understood.
We came to One Police.
Kevin,
so first of all,
Kevin, I'm answering your question from earlier. We have had meetings in the NYPD as long as I've been on the NYPD, right? And I've had probably discussions with many of the people up here with me. You and I cannot argue on that point because we feel the exact same thing. I'm telling you. We have done a bad job historically of having meetings. Erica, you know this. We have community council meetings. We have build-a-block meetings. We have this meeting. We have that meeting. We have a meeting for every day of the week. It is not good enough unless we are connecting with the people that we need to connect to. So we can't argue because we feel the same way. If it's not perfect tonight, what I would say is this is the first step in slicing the city apart. Count the people in here. If there's more than 50 people in here, I'm in trouble. There is almost no one in this room tonight. It is a small sampling of the neighborhood, which is why you were invited, Erica, to represent and make concerns for who you are representing known. But this is not you missed tonight's meeting and now you didn't get a voice. This is in 2 weeks, we're going to hit every borough. I believe that's the format. And then there is multiple, let me say it again, multiple meetings that are going to be chaired with a cross-section of leaders, clergy, NYPD, district attorneys, no, not just district attorneys, defense, advocates, community organizations. And here's the most important, and I'm talking to you, people that live in New York City. So this is a first step. I get what you're saying, but if we do not reach the youngest people, which is exactly why I didn't just say things, I put my money where my mouth was. And I took cops I'm down 2,600 cops. People are leaving far too fast right now. And even with that, I haven't cut back on the youth. We put more cops than ever to work with kids in this city. Somebody just touched on it. And not kids that are in trouble. It touches to the question, I'm sorry to point, but from the Rockaways earlier. You know, and this kind of goes to, this is far bigger than an NYPD issue, I believe. When you talked about segregated, right, and Ruben kind of said the isolation, but what is available for kids in this city? How can we help them? How do we get them the services they need? And I put more cops doing that task, not giving them summonses, not stopping them, not arresting them, trying to keep them out of trouble than anyone else. So I'll stand behind that till the cows come home. But I agree 100% with you. Of course I'll meet with them. Of course. Because that's who we are working for.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut your time, but I'm sure that everybody who's here appreciated that answer, but I also want to make sure that we keep going and keep giving a voice to the rest of the people in the community. So the next person, so the next person on Zoom is Clara Colon, who wants to talk about CCRB. Clara. There's a delay. All right. We'll come back to you. In the room, Clifton Diaz. Here's your microphone.
Commissioner, most of the stuff you have highlighted on as pertains to my question, but an area of concern is when you talk about people, when the people in the community talk about having more minorities, they're eliminated. Once they get through the process, they're eliminated for reasons, as far as I'm concerned, unbelievable. Before, in the old days, you had the character background. Now it's combined with, the psychological and stuff like that. It's eliminating a lot of minority people. We have people we need a second chance. That's out the window when this happens, when they try to get into the department. People should be given a second chance. If they do something that's big time, that's criminal, obviously they shouldn't be in the department. But if it's something that's minor, okay, disagreement maybe in another department or something that happened that doesn't warrant that, the rules are too strict. For example, my son was supposed to be coming into the department. The process got all fouled up, okay? A little minor thing, disagreement down south in the department down there, which is questionable with Washington, D.C. Transit. Then process up here, between the two, he's eliminated, okay? Good background, never been in trouble, never been arrested, honest student. I speak to other brothers and sisters in my community. They come up and tell me the same thing. They're eliminated. If that's the case, we'll never have any minority people in the department. We need them in the department. So that's one thing. The second and last thing I want to say, as it relates to the officers, having good officers. A long time ago, when the 113th precinct opened up, it was bad. I mean, bad. Chief Williams can even attest to that. He lived in the community. For years, I've worked from 71 until now. What we did, community people that you see here, okay, like Erica, Reverend Armstead, Kevin Livingston, others, we all work together. That's unique about our community in comparison to others. So we had Frederick Grover started the process of improving stuff. He's now at the academy. Jerry Sullivan, who needs a promotion. Okay, that's your man, I'm telling you. Okay? He, for example, did an outstanding job reaching out and what have you. Now we have Deputy Inspector Bohannon, all right? You have these people that, certain ones that are left down, and the ones who are bad go up, 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 and the ones who are good stay in the place, okay? Now, one of the things that I have done in my community is work closely with the officers and different things. We have a good working relationship, and we make sure that we honor them, the good officers. The bad ones, we don't pay no attention to, all right, in terms of rewarding them. We see what they do, we honor them, you have a better morale boost then. You know, not everybody against you. When you deserve to be hit, you deserve to be hit with criticism. When you don't deserve it, you know, you shouldn't have it. But one thing I can say, between now, 71, and now, you have done an outstanding job in terms of reaching out to the community. So all these other people that I hear saying, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to have him and this and that and stuff like that, I disagree with it. Okay, we need you. You're doing a good job. Outreach is good. The people that you're selecting, good. But, you know what I'm talking about. You know, have that person in there, you'll be better off. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that question. I can address part of that question. My prior assignment before I was the commanding officer of housing for Bronx and Queens, I was the executive officer of the Candidate Assessment Division, which is in charge of doing the background investigations, the medical investigations, psychological investigations. And the reason that I was assigned there was to take a look at the process. The process was unfair in a lot of ways. The process was long and drawn out in a lot of ways. And under the first Deputy Commissioner's office, we took a deep look at that. We brought in an outside consulting firm to work with myself and the commanding officer. We brought down the time, and the goal was to take from 1 year, from the time that the person takes the exam to the time they're available to be hired, depending on the allotment that's given from the city in the budget to put a class in. True what you say. There were a lot of things that we saw during that evaluation that were unfair. There were a lot of things that we looked at that, just like you said, some people made some minor mistakes in their youth or young adult life, and we took more of a totalitarian look at the process and at their backgrounds. We looked at also people that did make mistakes, and we said, okay, what is the time and distance from that mistake, and what have they done in their life since that mistake? You know, people make mistakes, and depending on the severity of the mistake, sometimes for this profession, there's no overcoming it to become a police officer. But other mistakes that are made, minor drug use, things like that, when they were younger. Look at or minor interactions with the law. We look at those things. We say, okay, what have they done since that derogatory information is what we called it, and what have they done in their life since then? Have they had any negative interactions with the police? Have they had any problems with employment? Because we look at their employment history also. What was the reason for any terminations? What was the reason for jumping from job to job? There's a lot of different things that we looked at. And also, what have they done? Have they now gone to school? Have they furthered their education? Have they gone into the military since their derogatory interactions or whatever the case may be? So I think that the process, the department put a lot of emphasis, put a lot of resources, a lot of their budget into fixing that problem, bringing the whole process together at the Candidate Assessment Center, at the old police academy, all under one roof. Big deal. Everything's getting done there. The process is streamlined a lot more now, and that is continuing from here. You're shaking your head no. What?
Because I've talked to a lot of people. We have a lot of people living where I live at, in the community here. I speak with them, and they tell me little stupid reasons why they're eliminated. We need, like Reverend Onset was talking about people of our color in the community who are police officers that we can work with. I'm not saying that have anything against white police officers, okay? All I'm saying is that we should be employable, okay? There's different circumstances why these people had different problems. It's not big-time criminal. It's minor stuff that they're still being eliminated for.
Well, this...
Okay, hold on, okay? So you're talking about what you have done and recently. For example, like I said, my son and others who are recent, they say that problems still exist. It has to be corrected, okay? These people haven't done anything bad. They have good backgrounds. They just need a second chance. Everybody now is giving people a second chance, okay? That's what they need.
100% I agree with you, and the process has a lot of layers. Just because...
So here's the deal. Let me just, because we could spend a lot of time talking about the process. I think we've got a good sense of what it is you're speaking about, and it's both on recruitment and hiring and on promotions, right? And so we need to appreciate you, but we need to make sure that that is something that we delve into.
Thank you. And then the tendency is to want to explain, but I think it's helpful to just listen. So the last question that we're going to take from Zoom before we move to the next phase of this evening is from Adam Ferentz. Adam,
yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having these series of meetings. Commissioner Shea, earlier you mentioned the blue wall of silence and spoke to the difficulty of breaking it. What concrete steps are you and the rest of your department taking to remove this barrier that effectively lets bad cops be bad cops? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for watching on Zoom. Clearly, there's more work to do. I could tell you that there are policies in place, mandating reporting, things such as that, of that nature. I think policies are important. Policies are not the end of the story, because policies that exist that are not followed, I think we all know that that's not the place that we want to go. What I would say to you, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, I apologize, but we have a pretty robust discipline system, and I'm speaking now to the Internal Affairs Bureau, and this is what investigates significant allegations of whether it's corruption or excessive force or misconduct. That's generally what we think about with our Internal Affairs Bureau. I can tell you that I don't want to misspeak, but I believe this is the case. The majority, I was going to say the vast majority, the majority of the cases that they receive, and I don't think the public realizes this, actually come from other officers. Now we have and I think that speaks to the blue wall, if you will. We have a mechanism where things must be reported. We also have policies where things can be reported anonymously to cover their reporting requirement. And how that's done is they get issued the equivalent of like a code word, so they can prove I did in fact see something wrong and I reported it, and here's how I can prove it. Those cases come to Internal Affairs Bureau via letter, via calls, via, at this day and age, emails, and they come frequently, and that's how the majority of the cases come. So I think that's a positive, and I think that speaks to exactly what you were referring. Is there more work to do? There's absolutely more work to do. And the ABLE concept that I spoke of earlier, which is the creating and continuing to create a culture where that's not thought of anymore as the blue wall of silence, but more as a culture of us cleaning our profession up. And again, when I speak to defending the police or being proud of the work that the police does, I don't find these two factors opposed at all. I can do both, and I assure you, and I really hope you believe this, that I have chaired meetings where members of the service at the highest ranks and down have stood up and said, we got to do better on this. I've heard them say, we need to fire more people. We need to call things out when they're wrong. So those are all internal statements and beliefs of this police department, and that's this year. Not perfect, but I think it speaks to the current climate, if you will, of the police department. You know, one of the slides that Matt put up earlier was, you know, there are different levels of discipline in the NYPD, and I think I might have touched on this earlier. When cases go to our internal trial room, a little off of your question, but I think it's relevant, 98% of the trials, the officer is found guilty. So we take discipline very serious. I think that we can do better in telling people how seriously we take it. And are we perfect? Absolutely not. But we are committed to getting better and better. Because it's so vital to trust.
So, Commissioner, I think that, you know, what I've heard from the calls and the people who've called in or dialed in via Zoom, engaged via Zoom, and even here, so far we've centered a lot on who's hired, who's promoted, you know, the training and the quality of training, the consistency of training, the responsiveness of training. We've heard a lot of questions about supervision and accountability, and then this blue wall of silence. And a lot of this ties into culture. So these are the themes that I've heard thus far. And what we're now going to do is we're going to shift. People have had an opportunity to ask questions, not to say that you can't ask questions anymore, but now we need to engage and just kind of have a free-for-all. Have a free-for-all. And what I mean by that is people on Zoom and people here in the audience, just talk about your experiences and let these individuals here who are the leadership know what concerns you. It doesn't have to be a question, doesn't have to be in the form of a question. Share your experience, your journey, and your concerns. We're going to do it here and we're going to do it on Zoom. And it looks like we've got a couple of hands, so let's start here. We've heard, hold tight. Let's hear from you first, sir.
How you doing? My name is Kenny Carter. I'm the president and founder of Faith Fathers Alive in the Hood. In regards to experiences, I currently advocate for a young man who is incarcerated at this time for about 2 years now. And the situation was there was a spree of robberies that was taking place with T-Mobile stores and different cell phone stores throughout Queens and different areas. This young man, he got incarcerated 3 days after the fact, but yet he wasn't on the scene of the crime. It was an officer who got killed in the process. The officer name was Officer Simonson, which was a decorated officer who was getting awarded, I believe, in that same day, if not that same week. The officer got killed by the hands of another officer, and then the news propaganded out that it was friendly fire. So now you have an officer that got killed by another officer, another young man who got shot over 11 times in 40 seconds, 40 to 44 seconds. He got shot, and he's still alive, you know. And this other young kid, his name is Jagger Freeman, who's a father of the daughter was 2 years old. I think she's around 5 or something now. And this young man is sitting in prison and just awaiting his fate. So in situations like this, when you have someone that's sitting there taking up time and space, how do you resolve issues like that? Because earlier you spoke and you said, Commissioner, you said that there are a lot of the body cam footage online is on YouTube, but on this particular case, I can't find it. When you talk about an officer who got murdered by the hands of another officer, by other responding officers who came with all body cams on, allegedly, there's no footage, there's no evidence of what happened with this particular situation, where an officer lost his life and a young black man is still incarcerated for a friendly fire case and looking at a felony murder charge for something he wasn't even in the area of. Is that clear?
I appreciate you, and I guess I want to make sure that we're all understanding. You're speaking to a distrust of the system because the system is saying that it's accountable, but you can't even get the information that you need that helps a young man who's behind bars prove his innocence. And there's the lack of transparency, and which breeds then lack of trust. Is that some of what you're saying?
It's partial, but the end of the main focus is you had an officer kill another officer, and they labeled it as friendly fire.
Okay.
And now you have another individual. It was two individuals. One who was shot over, I think, a numerous amount of times in a short period of seconds, and another man who was not on the scene of the crime, not mentioned, not seen on any footage, that was arrested 3 to 4 days after this situation occurred. So now this same guy, he's a father, he's a family man, he's in college, he lost his job, his whole life is just spiraled down from that particular point. So now I'm asking, what is the resolve for individuals who are undergoing situations such as that?
I hear you.
And what I'm hearing is kind of, what's the accountability? You know, why is this young man languishing while the officer who was involved with the shooting is not?
That part.
Okay. So
we're not
I don't know if we're going to be able
but
to talk to that. I mean, you're raising an issue that it's not an isolated event.
Excuse me?
This is not just one person to whom this happens.
Right. Is this
Right.
not?
It's systemic.
This is a systemic situation where individuals are being held accountable for other situations that they're not guilty of. But then we'll wait, and as if they don't have a life or don't have a family, they're not treated like human beings. So I'm just trying to get an understanding, you know, from the perspective of the commanding officer.
So let's step, if you want to speak to it, this is the meeting.
So I'm very familiar with all aspects of that case. Tragedy all around. I will not speak to anything dealing with the case, but I will answer your question or do the best I can. The reason I won't speak to it is because it is such a serious case that is still right now being prosecuted by the Queens District Attorney's Office. So that's the appropriate way to handle that. Without speaking to that particular case or that individual, and there's several that are still incarcerated while that case moves through the system. What I would say is that we have gone from a place only 5, 6, 7 years ago where we made hundreds of thousands more arrests than we do today. That's a fact. We used to average at one point, less than 10 years ago, over 400,000 arrests a year. We have purposefully changed how we police this city in the last 6, 7 years. And we've driven crime down. This year, we have had a significant change to that, and it's going to take all of us to change that. But an arrest being made, working with prosecutors, getting a grand jury, and moving through the system, I think that we do a very good job of balancing in New York City and setting a tone really for the country on how to do it smartly, effectively, keeping crime down and keeping people in the community safe from violent crimes, but also doing it at a time when we're having the lightest possible touch in terms of enforcement, stops, summonses, and arrests. And we've done that in New York City coming into this year. A specific case like this, it would be very, very improper for me to comment on. It's got to work its way through the criminal justice system.
So how would you comment
But I feel confident that when we make an arrest, there are proper safeguards in place. You have to look at where we are right now. I mean, the jail population in New York City is at a significantly lower rate than it has been just last year. Forget about 5 years ago. I mean, and the same is said for the state. What one of the challenges for me and prosecutors and legislators and everyone is to look at that entire landscape and how do we continue to improve on that? How do we continue to improve on jail is not the answer to everything, but also keep people safe? How do we provide money to the right areas and programs to keep people from getting entangled in the criminal justice system? This is extremely complicated, and we're one part of that complicated system.
When you speak about safety, the safety of, let's say, the officers that work with this other officer who squeezed the trigger and killed this other officer, right? Because see, there's a twofold to this. You're speaking on the individual who's locked up and going through the process, as you said. But there was an officer who killed another officer, and then you labeled it as friendly fire. Friendly fire is always at a time of war.
Well, the case in question is an individual that was committing an armed robbery and with an imitation pistol, and captured on video, and I've seen the video.
His name is Ransom. I'm personally, whatever happened to that young man, that was in his fate and his decisions. I said, when I first started, I said I was advocating for another young man by the name of Jagger Freeman.
I know the name. You don't have to tell me.
So Jagger Freeman was not in the area, not on footage, no cameras. But what I'm speaking about is the officer who killed the other officer. There's no mention of this officer anymore. And now the responsibility of the officer who got killed, his murder, is on both of these individuals as a felony murder charge. But the officer who squeezed the trigger and killed this officer is no longer mentioned. So how do you deal with individuals in your department that have reckless behaviors that causes a fatality in these particular situations? Because you talk about
respectfully,
safety.
Commissioner, I'm going to let you respond to this, but then this is really the listening part of it. So I know it's tough to not respond to every person, but we really want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share their stories, their ideas for how the department can move forward.
And I'm just going to interject before you respond to him and just say, I don't think that this is an answer. You're not going to be able to give him the answer that he's looking for right now.
Well, I'll say.
But you're raising a very critical issue. You're raising an issue about accountability. You're raising issues about how just is the justice system. Is it just for some people and not for others? You're bringing in the law, the criminal justice system on the judiciary side. You're bringing in all there. I appreciate what you're doing in this moment because it's policing and then it's more than policing.
Well, and if I heard you right, I think I did on the last point. Matt referenced it earlier, and some of the statistics were up there. This was a tragic case, and our job and my job specifically, and Ben Tucker's and Matt and other members of the team, is to make sure that we learn from a case like that. And all the talk in the world of that we're a police department that uses our firearm less than any major city, which is true, doesn't help if we have an incident that we haven't learned from. We look at every single incident. I personally get a briefing of every single one of these firearms discharges, and we look at them critically. How do we learn? How do we change training where necessary? The good news is we've started to see through the use of body-worn camera, not anecdotal stories, we think it's working. We can see it working at times because we see in subsequent incidents where people are putting some of the training that was learned from other incidents into play. The value of human life, whether it's an officer's, whether it's a bystander's, whether it's an individual from the community, whether it's a criminal's, is paramount to us. And we value that sanctity of life above all. It's a decision that's held to the highest regards when it has to get to that level. But we train and continue to train so that that is minimized at all possible costs. And I hope I did a decent job of answering that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your points. Let's take someone from online, and then we're going to come back.
Right, we're going to take Alan Silverstein, who's on Zoom. And again, you all are not responding now, you're just listening. Okay, Mr. Alan Silverstein.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Police Commissioner Shea. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak during this wonderful forum. Just a little bit of a background. I am a community partner.
Have we lost him?
We lost you for a second there, Alan. Hang on. You want to try that again? Okay. I'm sorry.
Hi,
I'm so
how
sorry.
is this?
There we go.
Yeah.
Does that work?
That works.
Yes, I'm going to ask
Yes?
you just if you would talk as quickly as you possibly can, because we've got a lot of people we need to hear from. Sorry.
Okay, very good. Okay. Being a community partner, I have been following the vision of Chief Harrison while he was Chief of Patrol, and I happened to be lucky enough to attend 8 out of the 16 meetings that Chief Pichardo was holding just prior to COVID, and took very copious notes of all the issues that we had in these meetings. I don't have a lot of questions, but I do have an awful lot of ideas after sitting in 8 or 9 of these meetings. Most of them were all social issues, and I came out, I did put together a major written report in which I believe the NYPD would be able to find of use, to be able to use the community partners that volunteer their services with the NYPD in bringing together all the communities and all the boroughs back to where we used to be. That being said, the NYPD cannot do it alone. They need our help. They need the communities to get together. They need the clergies to get together. They need the citizens to get together to bring the communities back to some sort of normal state again. If possible, I would love to set up a meeting with Police Commissioner Shea. I did have many a meeting with Chief Pichardo and his team, and unfortunately, we did have the looting going on, and then have COVID hit us, and everything stopped.
So, sir, I'm going to ask
I'll
you,
make
you
it
mentioned
real
that
quick.
you have a report.
I'll make it real quick.
If we
I'll make it real quick, and I'll give you the floor for other people.
Okay.
I would like to set up a meeting,
Okay,
if possible,
so we'll
down
see-
at 1
we'll see what we can do,
to
but
go
if-
over.
So we're going to have to move on, but if they have your information, then they can follow up with you, they can get your report and see if there's someone who can talk with you. We just need to get to several people. Mike, please. Is there a mic?
Good evening. My name is Gregory Hudson. I'm with Volunteers for Springfield Park, and first I'd like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be here. All that wonderful work, and all the people who are enjoying beautiful Springfield Park now. I am one of a handful of people who are primarily responsible for that. Speaking on the issue of accountability and things that NYPD and the community can do to move forward, I'm going to make a few suggestions that can immediately take place and thus change the quality of life for all of us, community as well as for NYPD. Sometimes we get too caught up with trying to find the next big word or thing when what we're looking for is right there in front of us. We make things too complicated. I learned many years ago this acronym called KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. And I always try to operate from that base. and I'm more into building bridges than burning bridges. For example, if you're really serious about increasing community relationships, you can start by getting rid of these 18-wheeler trucks that have absolutely dominated and wreaking havoc upon our communities in Southeast Queens. They are everywhere. And the danger and destruction that they pose to the children, the elderly, and the environment is unreal. If you take a ride down Springfield Boulevard right now, near that cemetery, it is so bad there that when I drive there now, I just duck my head. If you come to Springfield Park, we've been fighting along with our NCO to get those trucks out of there for about 3 or 4 years. And they've done a magnificent job, along with the PD, our city councilman. One of the things that is hurting us from getting rid of all of the trucks there is that our NCOs, they only had one commercial tow booth for the entire Sector A. One commercial tow booth. And our NCOs, Police Officer Louis Benzant and Officer Benjamin, they will be out all time of night with that one boot, trying to boot that truck, and couldn't boot another one until that truck went and paid the fee and they got the boot back. So if you really want to help the community, you need to give those gentlemen 10 commercial tow booths and then hold them accountable and say, fix Sector A, and they will do it without a doubt. Secondly, if
I'm
you...
going to ask you, because there are quite a few people here, and we want to make sure that we get to everybody.
Okay, just the last one, and then I'll wrap it up. The next thing is, all throughout our area are those cash for cars signs, every kind of sign you can imagine, and it destroys the community. I don't see that when I'm running. I'm a World Marathon runner. And when I'm running down Springfield from one end to the other end, when I cross Hillside Avenue, I don't see any of that. 18-wheeler trucks, cash for cars signs, I don't see any of that stuff. Okay. It should be consistent all the way out. So I'm going to end this now. I appreciate what you all are doing, but if you really want to make a change, you can start there and we can see it immediately. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And while you're thinking online or in the room, some questions that might be helpful is thinking about, what do you need to feel safe in your neighborhood? What could the NYPD do differently? What are they doing well? I saw a bunch of hands.
Erica? You want? Please. Oh.
So, the reason why this issue is so important to us is because we work day to day with people who are being harassed, brutalized for years, right? Under many commissioners around police brutality. So when he talks about the question of people can't get certain jobs, it is because they're arrested over and over and over again, not because they committed a crime, but because they live in an area, because they are discriminated upon, because it means nothing to most of the people who come into our community. And when we run, that's a thing. We run because people are tired of being taken to the precinct and put through the process, dehumanized, butt search, strip search, over and over again for years, right? And so you're just a new commissioner. At the end of the next year, you're gone, right? And somebody else is there selling stories, maybe do like Trump and change the whole damn system, right? But this is real to us. And so when we say this, right, it is someone coming in like you. Someone said on my live that the question is for you to say, not under my watch. Not under my watch. You're fired. You're suspended for 30 days for standing there and watching it happen. Because what is happening to us is traumatization over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. So standing in front and telling us we can't come in is just a reinforcement of people coming into our community. And look at this. You got 7 people here. And no disrespect to the 7 people. But they're on the police advisory committee already. Right? And so there's people who are in Southeast Queens that are engaged with police misconduct for a long period of time. You could look in your book and pick people who might have filed the most complaints from CCRB and bring them to the meeting. People who got real issues, no disrespect to the truck and the boot, but whose kids are getting bashed over the head. I have an employee who transferred his life, right? Like you said, you transferred in terms of how police used to treat us to who you are. You want us to look at you different? He transferred his life, but still gets pulled over, butt searched, harassed by police. His name is Danny, who does it, from the 113 precinct. And he does it to a lot of people. And you say that I came to NYPD, right? Yes, we're on the advisory committee with Mr. Chauncey over there and others. We didn't know nothing about this. Nothing. But we work closest with the people who impact the trauma from NYPD every day. And so if we want to talk about real reform and real innovation, the crisis management system is the first step. It's the first step because that's what it's doing. Right? And so the question of bad police is a serious one because we could talk till we're blue in our face. If you're not firing these people who are coming into our community and every day traumatizing people who don't give a ish about us, and y'all know what, then you look at the NYPD 12 and you want to blackball them for saying stuff that is against, quote, blue wall, right? And so you want us to come here and listen, and you're going around to communities and listening to people, no disrespect, but who don't have real serious, consistent issues. And so if you're talking about real reform, then start from the gate doing it right. Start from the gate doing it right. Because this is New York City tax dollars that's paying for people to go around and do these meetings. Right? And so let's do it right. Because we don't have to have a lot of conversation. We know what's wrong with policing.
If it's okay with you, I think what I want to do is say, I understand that you want to respond, but it wasn't, she said no disrespect, and I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak.
Some of the changes that we've seen in the police department over the years, especially recent years, are compulsory. So while we appreciate it, they've only taken place because of the advocacy, the protest of the people. So sometimes when we speak, it comes across like, yeah, we're doing this, like we came up with this great idea and we're making good stuff happen here. We just want to be really clear about that. A number of the changes that are benefiting us as a community now are taking place because the community said enough is enough. Okay. That being said, I would like to say that Chief Holmes was stating at the beginning of this meeting about some innovative ways to engage and certain strategies that would be engaging. So in Far Rockaway, I had to sit down with my commanding officer and our NCOs, and we had some invite Alden and Brian from the commissioner's office to discuss something that was innovative. And I will say that I was pleasantly surprised that I didn't have to push as much as I usually have to push to get things done. In Rockaway, I think it's not a secret, 40% of our population in 11691, which is predominantly minority, brown and black people, is 40% 25 and younger. There's nothing but youth in Rockaway. And so what we need to do is innovatively engage those youth. So we have Catholic Charities got money to do some employment, similar to Summer Youth, SYEP, or Work, Learn, and Grow. So they got 50 slots where these young people will be paid 10 hours a week, $15 an hour for 10 weeks. If they complete the 10 weeks, they get a $500 bonus. So that's $2,000. So that's real money, 14 to 21 years old. So I said, okay, give me 20 slots. Give me 20 slots. The church, my church, Auburn Church of God, will be the home, the work site for those 20 youth. But I will not be the person working with those 20 youth. I want police officers working with those 20 youth. In our sit down, we got an agreement. And what I appreciate with my commanding officer is that he let the officers know, because I said to them, I said, I can't do this. Don't come for 1 week and say, oh, you know what, Deneen, we got, you know, there's outrage happening in the city and we got to take them off of that detail. You got to own it for 10 weeks. And I appreciate my commanding officer, Eric Robinson, that said, I don't care what happens in the city, I got to have cops in the 101. So those cops that are doing those youth, those 20 youth, will have to remain in the 101. That's your baby. And then we talked to Alden about curriculum and different things we could do. The other part of that is very vital to me is I said I don't want to see officers with badges and belts and the full 9 on trying to shoot a basketball or play volleyball or chess or checkers. Put them in, you know, plain clothes, or I don't care if they have a sweatshirt or a T-shirt that says NYPD, but they're not strapped. So it's not as Sister said over here, it won't be traumatizing, because like I'm trying to present a message, and that message is for those young people to understand that police officers are human beings, that they have emotions and feelings too. That uniform literally is their job, right? And then when they engage with those officers for those 10 weeks, and again, the other part of that is Rosalind, Rock Safe Streets, the piece of that was, I didn't want the goody two-shoes that were raised like me, whose daddy was a World War II vet, who taught everybody, yes, sir, and yes, sir, and no, sir, no, ma'am, and if I didn't, I got the backhand. I want the ones that are on the spectrum, that are on almost, maybe not in the gang, but they're at risk. And so I asked Rosalind, I said, Rock Safe Streets, y'all out there every day doing this. Identify 20 at risk for me. Not the ones that's in it, because the ones that's in it not going to want to do it anyhow. I want the ones that are being tempted. Now they're going to get cash, so the incentive is there already. They're going to get paid. It's literally a job. Not just a play, but some life-changing experiences that can take place with those youth, engaging in those officers in that way for an extended period of time. So they're getting monetary benefit, but also the other aspect, it'll happen naturally. It'll happen organically while they engage with those officers that are engageable. Not officers that are used to busting heads. Don't bring me like some of my NCOs that came out of crime that are used to throwing people against the wall. I'm like, how did you become an NCO? I need to know that, okay? I want officers that got understanding. Maybe they were that wayward child, and maybe they had those mistakes before they got into the department, and now they're able to understand and vibe with that youth and see where they're coming from. So that's what I would call innovative. That's what I would call challenging strategies to engage the youth. And I think that's something that we could employ in other communities, not just Rockaway, that could start to be beneficial. Because you got to grab them when they're young.
And I hate to interrupt, but I think yours is going to have to be the last word on this because we've run out of time. So I think there are going to be additional meetings. There are going to be additional ways for people to engage. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating.
And so I just want to close out by addressing her. So I'm Chief Holmes, and my son is a police officer in the Rockaways, and he's part of the team that the police commissioner spoke about earlier, that's with the Giants and engaging the kids, and something he's very passionate about. But with that being said, I can assure you, when I came back to the police department New Year's Eve, I got sworn in. I was gone for just about a year. I spoke with Commissioner Shea, and the first thing he said was, Juanita, first he said, I'm hiring Chauncey Parker, because this is a man that sits in the wings, but this is a man that gets it done when it comes to the money that we need to get programs for children, to enhance parks, whatever it is, Chauncey gets it done financially. But with that being said, he said, you know, people say that the youth don't like us. We're missing a whole generation, right? This is the commissioner's words, and I quote, we're missing a whole generation. We have to do something to engage the youth, and not just the youth that have had some interaction, minor or whatever, with the law, but all children. 330 cops, I know because I went to school safety, and that was a task force that we had that was addressing children in a different way. Those cops are now what we call YCOs, and they were going through their training, and we had all these great ideas. We're bringing everybody to the table: parole, probation, administration, children's services, right? District attorney's offices. Everyone was going to be held accountable. Where did we go wrong that a 14-year-old is being locked up for robbery? Especially when we had notice. When I say notice, whether it was an incident report in school, whether it was a domestic incident report at home, where did we go wrong? So 2 meetings we held like that, and we were met with COVID. So I can assure you that the youth is at the top of the police department's list. I promise you that. Recruitment, top of the list. I promise you that, in the city. So I just wanted to address that before we close out. I also wanted to say that everything said here tonight, and that goes for everyone in our virtual world that had comments that they made or recommendations, someone will definitely get back to you. Erica, I want those same youth in the room. And the next meeting we have with you, those are the voices we want at the table. Police reform, we've been doing this way back since NCO, right? We just strive to get better. We started back then. We know where we went wrong with Stop, Question, and Frisk. We openly admitted to that, right? So progress. I've seen some progress with community relations, and we'll continually move in that direction, but with the youth that you're speaking about. That is key, hearing their voice, right? So with that, I'm going to close out. I'm going to turn over to our police commissioner did I say everything? I'm sorry. No, you hit it. I apologize. But thank you all for being here. Erica, you will not forgotten. You will never be forgotten. You know, I've known you for years. So trust me, those children will have a voice at the table. Commissioner?
Anything I say after that, I think, is just water under the bridge. Juanita, perfect closing. I just want to say thank you to everyone that came tonight. We hear you, and I think this is a step. A step without action is just that. It's just a step. So we recognize that. I really want to thank everyone here, but really, I'm getting signs held up to me over there. There's hundreds of people online right now. So that's positive. And the comments Juanita said, we're going to review them. We're going to catalog them. What I'm thinking of it, too, is I would love a word cloud of, like, week after week, what are the topics that are coming up most, right? And we have a lot of work to do on the police department side. Thank you for everyone that's helping us on this journey, and we'll talk to you soon.